Croc's finally back, and no, I don't mean the shoes, because Croc Legend of the Gobbos is finally being remastered after nearly 30 years, back from the original Saturn and PlayStation, only now with enhanced visuals, way better controls, behind the scenes features, and plenty more. And I had the opportunity to chat with a few developers behind the remaster as well as the original game, including Jez Sand, who's the original founder of Argonaut, Mike Arkin, who's the co-CEO of Argonaut, and Scott Butler, who was a lead artist on the original game, as well as being an accomplished actor. Look at all those credits! And during our chat, we covered all kinds of topics, including how the remaster came to be, how Croc ended up in Astro Bot, as well as touching on Croc's origin story, which began as a game called Yoshi Racing? Stay tuned for that and plenty more, as we ended up talking for so long, I've had to split this interview into 2 parts, with part 2 coming soon and includes a ton of questions from all of you. So with that out of the way, let's get to the interview in which we talk a lot of Croc, in the best sense possible. Jez, so I have a question for you. What came first? The relaunch or the new life given to Argonaut, or the remaster of Croc? Tell me a little bit more about how this came to be, because as you said, you started Argonaut in your teens, which is wild to me. And then the company was liquidated, I think, 20 years ago, and now it's back. So tell us a little bit about that process. Was Croc the impetus for that, or was there more to it?
So just to backtrack a little bit, when Argonaut, the original Argonaut, ended, I bought the rights to the IP to protect it, and I sat on it for a very long time. And I always wanted to revisit Croc, but it was just never the right time. Mm-hmm. And then eventually, Gary and Mike said, let's do Croc, it is the right time. So we started Croc first, and then thought, well, we need to have a company, and there was some discussion over what the company should be called, and we decided to do Argonaut Reborn. So it's Argonaut Games Inc., and Croc is the first game.
So they're kind of like intertwined, it seems, like Croc and Argonaut, which is so fitting considering just how how important Croc is to Argonaut's history, it seems like, at least from an outside perspective.
For sure, yeah. And obviously if Croc does well, then we'll go on to other Argonaut IP and maybe even some other games too.
I did notice, I've been playing around with the remaster a little bit, and I noticed the opening, I believe the company logo at the beginning teases or has posters for other Argonaut games. So is that a possible glimpse into the future there at all, or?
I mean, obviously, it's we would love to do other Argonaut games, and it has to all work. The people have to love what we're doing, and hopefully they will.
So what's it like coming back to Croc after all these years? I think it's been 20 years since the last Croc game in 2006, and 27 since the original Croc on PlayStation and Saturn. What's it like revisiting, this classic game that so many people, grew up with? Was it, weird at all going back to it? Were you surprised by anything? Like, what's that been like?
For me, it was like wonderful to see it come back and to see it happening and real and running on today's platforms, which is in itself is an achievement. And it was a lot of work, and it took some time, but we did it right. So we made it every bit as good as it could have been, but we also had sensitive enhancements to it to take advantage of more capabilities optionally, but you can turn them all off and have it look like it did on the PlayStation.
Yeah, with the press of a button, you can just do it instantly, which is I always love whenever remasters do that, and it's so fun to see the modern visuals against the original textures and character models, and it really shows like the amount of work that has gone into the remaster, and how it's not just an up-res, port. It's like, oh, every model looks dramatically better, or which they're rounder. You don't see the polygonal outline. But if you want that,
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. It's still there. And I have to say, I've been toggling back and forth myself. I love a both look. I imagine the remaster is probably how a lot of people remember the game looking in their head, and then now, toggling it is like, oh, that actually is how it looked, but it still looks really good. And that's a credit to you, Scott, who helped, create these the original artwork for the game, right? So what's this been like for you?
Yeah, it's so interesting because I've been asked about, is there going to be a Croc remaster, or a remake, or anything as a new Croc, for probably over 10 years. I mean, it has been hundreds of messages and things and emails and stuff. Because, I do sort of like, sometimes comment on some of the Croc videos and things. I try to be a bit active in the community, and, I just love all the fans, and what's been great is there's like new and old fans. There's people who are, so young they weren't even born when the game came out, yet they're like, they're big into retro games. They play them a lot. So it's been really wonderful, kind of like, giving little tidbits of BTS about them and stuff on comments and things. But seeing the remaster with the enhanced art is just so fascinating to me, because I remember so vividly creating some of that stuff, and then also running the team with the other artists creating that stuff, because I didn't obviously make everything. I did build Croc, but but yeah, it's fascinating seeing all that stuff. It's funny, I thought as a games player, I thought, when I'm playing it, because I actually haven't played it yet, but when I'm playing it, I think I'm going to keep switching back and forth between the modes, because one half of me wants to see all the shiny new enhancements, and the other half of me is like, oh, but remember how it looked, So it's going to be interesting. But I'm so excited for people to play it, to get their hands on it, and what I love is that the nostalgia of Croc and the feeling of Croc and the charm of it is absolutely intact, and that's what I'm really, really happy about. I mean, it could have gone down a different route where you're doing an entire remake and everything has changed, and is it still the same? Does it still have that thing? So I'm really, really happy to see that that's all in there. And I really love the fact that there's modes in there and options, because everyone's going to have different opinions or different feelings of what they want to, enhance or not enhance. So.
And there was a lot of discussion about that, when we started. Like, I actually said, I don't think we need all this retro stuff. Like, nobody really wants to play with, low poly models or, pixelated graphics, right? And I just kept saying, it's not worth their time. Like, people are going to say they want it, but they're never going to do it. And, the guys who were doing the work, ignored me, and they went and did it anyway. And, when we first started to show it to some of the fans, and we have some beta testers who are playing. There's a Discord which is full of Croc, the most hardcore Croc fans, right? And we did our first, the trailer, and we did some footage that we released and things like that. And every one of them was like, yeah, this is amazing. Like, this is how this should be treated. And I was a bit kind of surprised. I mean, it was a pleasant surprise, right? That they wanted it. And we did a stream with someone who was playing the game while we were talking, and he kept putting it in the retro mode. And I was like, hey, why are you doing that? Right? I was like, what? At first, I actually thought the game was broken. I was like, what's going on? Why is it so pixelated? He goes, oh, I'm putting it in the retro mode. And I said, oh, do you want that? Like, is that? He's like, oh yeah, man. He's like, it like brings back the memory of playing this, PlayStation 1 game. And I don't think I realized how strong the nostalgia was. And we, but we found out really fast once we made the announcement and we talked about it. People started telling us stories, right, about their childhood, and like, oh, I played Croc with my dad, or, that was my first game. I got a bunch of people said that was my first PlayStation game. So, I learned the lesson, and like, from now on, every game we do, it's a remaster. I think we keep those classic graphics in there. I think it's an important thing.
There's just something so charming about them, I think. I've been on a bit of a retro kick recently. Like, I've been revisiting games from my past and some games I missed. Unfortunately, Croc was one of those games I missed at the time. I was a Nintendo kid, so I didn't have the platform for it, but I always wanted to play it. So I love now being able to, revisit this game both with the more modern visuals, but also being able to toggle back to what it was at the time, and I'm able to appreciate it on that level. It's like, wow, this game looked really good for 1997, I believe. And there's still there's a charm to that. So it's great having the option to, toggle between the two. So how has that process been, upgrading these assets for the modern day? How did you decide going about that? Like, where did you draw the line, and how far do you improve something? Yeah,
I think something we talked about a lot when we first started was like, how far do we take this? And I think on a remaster you could spend $25 million and rebuild the game in Unreal, build all the assets from scratch, right? And we thought, look, I mean, the charm of Croc is it's the animation. It's it's his. He's charming. He's adorable. And some of that might get lost if we tried to rebuild it. And this is something I've done. I've worked on a few remasters, and I think that we always try to go back to the original code and assets as much as we can. So we came up with some proprietary tech, basically, that we can upscale the polygons in real time, and essentially smooth the models and get rid of all the those sharp edges. And that was also something that allowed us to do this a little bit faster. So by building some tech, we do all that, and some of the original models we didn't have.
Mm-hmm.
So really, like, that was the only way to keep the original models and the original animation, was to write some tech to do that. And then I think we looked for, like, where can we improve things? Like, wherever we'd play the game and say, hey, can we fix this? Can we like, look at that? That's a little bit, but we want to keep the original look as much as possible. So some things got hand tweaked, but a lot of it was done through some kind of automated tech.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad the stuff that we keep improving, right? And we'll use that for the next game that we work on, and it lets us make these things faster. And I hate to say it, I feel bad saying it, but also a lot cheaper.
Well, because time is money, right? So saving time is also saving money, keeping the budget down. So,
and that's important, because if we can do a remaster for half the price, right, then that means we're more likely to look at something that we can remaster, that we're like, if we're not sure,
right.
And then we were not sure about Croc. Like, we had no idea if people wanted more Croc. And as soon as we made the announcement, we were overwhelmed with support from the fans and the community, and we're like, oh, okay, I guess people did want Croc.
Perhaps one of the few times saying that's a little Croc is actually a good thing.
There you go. We've definitely had a lot of Croc puns the last 2 years.
I can only imagine. One of the questions we had from the audience was, do they wear Crocs? I'm like, I'm not asking that. But...
You can't see us below the camera, but yes. No.
I spent the last 5 years wearing Crocs almost every day. I'm actually trying to grow out of my Crocs. I have a pair of Pokemon Crocs that are awesome, and I may get a tattoo of Croc wearing Crocs.
That would be amazing, actually.
Jez seems to disagree. Oh, there you go.
I love that.
There's Croc.
And I do not own any Crocs.
You don't own any Crocs, really?
No.
Oh,
Are
they're
you and me
so
both,
comfortable.
No.
No, you just slide into them, and they're super comfortable. And
Here the cool shoes are on running. I don't know. They're Swiss.
I've never heard of that.
Maybe they haven't made it to America.
Someday we're a little behind.
I'm so writing that down. On running.
So, Scott, you just showed off your Croc figurine there. And I know you've helped consult on the remaster. So I guess for you, like, what did you have? Like, was there anything that was essential for translating the look of Croc or retaining into the remastered form? Was there anything that we wouldn't think about as fans? Like, oh yeah, like that was essential to how Croc looked.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't directly involved in the creation of Remaster, but talking to Gary, over the last year, there was quite a bit of discussion about how it's looking, and I would sort of point out like a bug or something, like, oh, that sky is not quite right, it's not being centered properly, or just kind of like the sort of day-to-day of like updates, and offering a little bit of a sort of my opinion and things like that. So I didn't really sort of have direct hand on it, but it was sort of good to see the evolution of it, and then sort of like know that it's in good hands, and I was really happy about it. But again, I was very, very, very excited to see the game with the enhanced artwork still retain that look. I mean, we've seen Croc in a high-res form before for the marketing materials, the cover, that kind of stuff. So even back in the 90s, I'd seen Croc, all smooth and on the cover, and sometimes, marketing materials, when they're up-res, can sort of lose the charm of the game art, but that managed to retain it very well. So I knew it could be done, because I'd sort of seen it before. But then, seeing the rest of it too, with like the enemies and the bosses and the environments and everything, it's just, I don't know, I'm really pleased with it. So, but yeah, had a sort of
Scott,
kind of
pick
a
up
guidance role.
pick up that plush again.
Oh yeah.
I
So
mean,
yeah, it's a little figure. It's made by an artist in Italy, and
oh, it's not plush. Is it hard? Is it plastic?
yeah, it's 3D printed.
Okay.
I think Greg, you have a big. Sorry, Jez, you have a big one, don't you? Right? Somewhere.
I'll avoid.
Sorry, Croc.
I'll avoid the jokes. Yeah, I do somewhere, but his head fell off, and then I think we had to glue it back on again.
Oh no!
Because it's in like multiple pieces printed and then glued on, and yeah. But he has survived, and he's been repaired somewhere.
But Scott, what stands out when you held that up, right, is the eyes, and how Croc's eyes, and it's really to me like one of the most iconic things. You know, his eyes are above his head. You know, it really like there's no animal on planet Earth that has eyes outside of their head, right? But that to me is like you gotta put that's Croc, right? And it's something that comes up all the time. With
and one tooth as well, which like some people get wrong when they try to reproduce it.
Yeah,
we can only afford one tooth on PS1. On PS2, we might have been able to do the second tooth, but
right, it just wasn't enough
polygon budget. Yeah.
yeah.
But those are the two things that, you know, Andre, when people like if they do a drawing or they do a model or something, we're always like that you know, you have to get the eyes right, because people automatically try to put green around the eyes and one tooth, and people miss that sometimes. But I love that model, Scott.
I'll tell you a quick story about that. So I do conventions, you know, I go sort of as a guest, you know, for games and acting, and because Croc, you know, is so old, there's no merch around that, you know, that is like current. And when I started talking to Gary, I said I was going to start doing these conventions. I said, I kind of need something to take to the conventions. And I know there's like no merch right now. And I want to ask you as the producer and make sure it's okay. But there's a guy on Etsy who makes these little retro figurines, and they're really, really cute, you know. He just makes a few of them, you know, it's kind of a small thing. And would you be okay with me like reaching out to him and getting, originally it was the big ones, you know, these Crocs, and I could take them to the conventions, and yeah, it's not official merch, but I can also promote the game and the remaster, you know, when we're allowed to talk about it, all that kind of stuff. And he said, yeah, that's fine. You know, we're talking super low volume, like maybe 20 of these things or whatever. So I've been bringing them, and then I've basically been, you know, the guy in Italy designed a smaller, cheaper one for me, and he sends them in a box, and like Jez said, they're all in parts. I have to glue them together so they can, like, you know, kind of assemble them and put them in little boxes, and then I sign them and you know, give them to fans. But you know, now with the new one coming out, you know, if we have any merch or anything, then I'll probably be switching over to that. But it's been kind of fun putting that little guy out on the table and having people sort of walk by and go, hey, recognize him. Oh wow, is that Croc? Oh, it's so cool, you know. So it's kind of like a really fun little talking point, and then, you know, kind of conversation.
Scott, we do have to send you a royalty bill, by the way, for all the merch
that's right.
signing. It's 10%. No, well, I mean, so Scott, you know, we do have T-shirts now. So when we announced, you know, we launched, we did, you know, a pre-order campaign for the collector's edition, and the collector's edition does have a little statue, kind of like that one, and there's some stickers and some other things in the box, and you know, people kept asking about a T-shirt. So while the collector's edition was in pre-order, we also put up a T-shirt, and it comes in 5 different colors, and there's a men's version, there's a ladies cut also. The pre-order campaign is done, but the T-shirt is still available. So, you know, if you're watching this and you want a Croc T-shirt, I think it'll be up there for probably, you know, another few weeks. It's a great shirt, and it's essentially, we took the original Croc T-shirt and we copied the design. We added the new Argonaut logo, but, you know, essentially it's the same as that classic T-shirt. And Gary, who's not here, actually still wears that classic Croc T-shirt, you know, 20 years later. So there's a few of those still around, but now you can get the new one.
Sounds like we'll have to get you one, Scott. So you can wear that at the
But we're gonna sell it to Scott because he's been, ripping off our merchandise for 20
Get
years.
some money back. I still have my original Croc t-shirt, and I have a beanie, I believe. The beanie's in really good shape, but the t-shirt's been worn quite a bit. So
Does the beanie have the eyes like sticking out on top too? Because
I wish that'd be great. No, it has a little logo on there, sort of black beanie. It's very nice.
So you helped you helped create the original Croc model, is that right, Scott?
Yeah, unless my memory is wrong. I believe I modeled him in 3D Studio. So yeah, that was one of the first things we did. Because I remember with Tony and Lewis, the programmers, we wanted to get a Croc model done, and then we got him rigged and animated. So he had like a little walk cycle, I believe, was the first thing. And then we did like a tech test. We got the PlayStation dev kit, up and running, and the programmers did the work to get something to display on screen because it always took a little bit of time. And then we had a Croc on there, and then they started adding extra Crocs, and we were like, wow, this actually is running pretty fast, even with a whole ton of Crocs on screen. It's because it was our first, well, for me, our first time seeing the PlayStation 1 running, and we didn't know what to expect. We'd worked on other consoles before that, but a lot of consoles that we had worked on were very primarily 2D focused. So, seeing the PlayStation do what it could do, and even compared to like N64, it was able to push quite a number of polygons. It's just N64 could maybe push prettier polygons, but the PS1 was pretty good on the polygon number front. So we were pleasantly surprised, and we started sort of, rethinking our focus of like the environments and things like that, and sort of growing it from there.
That's awesome. And do you remember, creating that original model, how much of it was, if you remember, influenced by, the design or the hardware limitations at the time? We've already joked about the tooth being, we couldn't afford 2 teeth. Do you remember how much of that factored into the design for Croc, and anything else about, how Croc's iconic design, came to be?
Yeah, there are already concepts by Simon Keating, who did wonderful designs for everything in the game. When I was starting to work on the model, the Croc design obviously was done, and then I was looking at it and I was like, wow, this is a lot of round shapes for low polygons, So that was obviously a challenge. You don't want eyes looking like diamonds and things, it's just you had to really push the polygons around and figure out where you need them. But I'd already done quite a bit of 3D before that. Some of it sort of pre-rendered stuff, some of it real time. And I'm sure there was probably a little bit of a discussion with Tony and Lewis about polygon budgets, about let's try for this number first and see how we land, But I think I already sort of had an idea of like what I should aim for roughly to sort of be realistic, but also, make it look good, hopefully.
Speaking of which, though, the remaster doesn't just improve the visuals, but it also arguably improves the controls, in that it offers more modern controls that I think people who have grown or played more recent platformers would be more used to. But it also offers the classic controls as well via the D-pad. So I was curious, how that came to be. Was there any discussion of retaining the original controls entirely, or were you like, no, we have to add some kind of modern, more modern interface into this thing? So how did that come about?
Yeah,
man?
I mean that was an easy one, because we knew from the first conversation, right? We were like, what do we do with this? Oh, make it look better, improve the controls. And we knew that was one of the weakest kind of parts of the original game was the controls. And part of the reason for that was that you may not remember, but PlayStation 1 had a D-pad.
Right.
There were no analog sticks for like a year or two. And then they launched this DualShock controller, right? That had, I don't think it was DualShock. I think the first one was just the dual analog.
Right.
I don't think it even had the rumble at that point. It was just 2 analog sticks. We got that controller basically like 2 weeks before the game was done. And so I think some crude analog controls were done probably in a day or something. Mm-hmm. But it really was never implemented correctly. And the game was designed around playing with the D-pad. So, we knew we got to fix that. We got to, completely redesign the controls for a modern controller, or, PC with a controller or whatever. But we had people screaming online saying, please leave those original controls in. And the compromise, which works out great, is that on a controller you have analog sticks and a D-pad. So we just left the D-pad on the D-pad, right? Like the old controls are right there. Or if you move your finger over to the analog sticks, you play with the new controls. So, and again, like people who have played it have been very complimentary that it works. The controls are definitely better, and they're happy about the way we handled it, which, that's the part that makes me happy.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I unfortunately missed Croc at the time, but replaying it now, I tried both, and yeah, thank you for adding the modern controls, because it feels fantastic, whereas going back to the D-pad does feel, I'm glad it's there for those who grew up with the game, but it's much more playable for those who didn't, to use the analog controls. But I guess for you, Jez, as one who worked on the original game in depth, what's it like for you, to replay or to add those modern controls? And do you have a preference yourself? Like, which one do you find yourself using?
That's a good question. I'm probably used to the D-pad, so I would probably still like the D-pad, but I'm sure that the analog controls, if you get the hang of them, are probably better.
Jez being kind of old school, right? Like that's a typical response we get. Someone who's old school is like, oh, I want to try the D-pad. But anyone who's a 15-year-old is going to put their fingers on the analog controls, right? And that's going to be what they're used to.
But back then, there weren't any analog games. So, and it was probably one of the first games, because as Mike said, the analog sticks came out just before we shipped, and we were told by Sony, you have to support our new joystick. So, we had a very short amount of time to figure out what to do with it, and no one else had done it before, so we couldn't just copy someone else's controls.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost intuitive to us today, right? It's like you move on the left stick, you move the camera with the right stick, and I wasn't there when this happened, but I can imagine, being in that room where they were just like, we have two sticks, what do we do with them? Why are there two? Like, what do we do with the other one?
Right.
And we did dramatically improve the camera also. And that's the one place we've been asked a couple of times, oh, can I have the old camera? And we're like, no.
You don't want it.
That's the one place where we're like, there's no one that wants the old camera, right? Like there's no player that is like, oh, I really want to be in the corner with the camera staring at a wall because it's, it doesn't spin around right. You just don't want that. So even with the old controls, the new camera is there, and it does just make the experience better. So maybe I'm being stubborn on that one, but no, you don't want that.
No, those early 3D cameras across the board were pretty rough, and it's easy. Yeah, it's for anyone who doesn't know, Croc was one of the earliest 3D platformers. There weren't that many back then, and you guys were kind of figuring out as you go, right?
I mean, think about how hard it is to get the camera right, especially on a not very powerful CPU, because the camera has to figure out what you want to see and still show you, and not pierce any objects that are in the world. And that's a pretty challenging thing to do on a low CPU machine, and it's a lot easier to do with today's horsepower.
Is there anything about the remaster that proved to be particularly difficult, or anything that surprised you, revisiting Croc? It's like, oh, this is, either something that held up or didn't, something that needed to be changed? Anything else that, we wouldn't think about as the fans, but it's like, oh, a lot of thought went into this, because you're just revisiting every aspect of the game, right?
Yeah, I think, the hardest part starting the project was finding the source code. And, we actually looked for the code for a year before we actually said, yeah, we're going to do this. We just said, hey, let's go look and see if we can find it. And Jez said he had it and couldn't find it in his house. So
I knew I had a backup somewhere, but I couldn't find it. Tried very hard. Turned the house upside down.
So then what we did was we reached out to everyone on the original team, hoping maybe somebody had a floppy in a drawer or something, and that didn't work. And and then we ended up Googling, and there was a guy in Australia who had the code, who had been maintaining it.
Wow.
And had been fixing bugs, and we're like, holy crap. You know, it was there the whole time. Literally, all we had to do was Google. Again, we thought to look in Jez's house. We didn't think to look on the internet. So we reached out to him and said, "Hey, can we have this?" And he panicked because he thought we were, that he was in trouble, right? and we had to. I think we had to have Jez write a letter, basically saying, we're not coming after you. Like, we're very happy to have found this. Please. And then he gave us the code, kind of helped us out a little bit, and he actually helped us out with the classic edition. I don't know if you've seen, in the news, if you buy the PC version, it comes with the classic version of Croc, with the original version. But we had to do a little bit of work to make that run on a modern PC. So he gave us a lot of tips because he knew the code really well. But that was probably the hardest part of the whole thing. Was really just finding the code. And then, deciding which way to go in terms of the look, which things to enhance, which things to leave. And then, maybe like a month into the project, we had this idea to maybe have some homage to the original team or the merch, the making of. And I looked at some other remasters that had a lot of that. And we just kind of had maybe a little course change. Hey, we really need to do this. Like, to really do this right, we need this, like, Crocopedia, which we call it. And so what we ended up doing was talking to everyone on the original team. And it took a year to do, right? We called everybody. Everybody had a box in the attic. But, so like the original lead designer said, there's no design document. We never wrote a design document. There was no design document. And then one of the other designers was like, oh, here's the design document. It was like, 75-page design document. So, so we have that in the Crocopedia. Like, you can open that up and look at the entire original design document page by page. We have all of the merchandise. There was a plush. There was a thumb drive. There was a CD case. There were T-shirts. There was a jacket. There was a beanie.
I still have the jacket somewhere. I need to find it, but yeah.
Yeah, well, John Edelson had everything, right? So he was the original producer, and I think Jez, correct me here, managing director of Argonaut at the time, right?
Yeah.
So he had just had everything, and so he pulled it all out and took pictures for us, and we were able to put all of that, into the Crocopedia.
That's amazing, and that's included in the game, so people can check this out for themselves.
It was a challenge when we realized, that it doubled or tripled our download size. So, because we also have 17 interviews with, Scott and Jez and some other members of the original team, some members of the new team. There's a couple of surprise, guests that talk about Croc, and pictures of all of the merch and concept art and design docs and all kinds of things.
So it sounds like, you had reached out at the least to everyone you could that worked on the original game. And I'm curious, how many people from the original development staff are working on the remaster? Obviously, you three were all involved on some level, even if Mike only for a day. Back then, I believe you said. Are there any other... One day. Are there any other people on the team from the original development staff? Or is it all... newer people?
No, there's. I think the original team, they've all spread their wings and gone all sorts of different directions. Some of them are still in games, some of them are not. But no, it's an all new team, apart from Gary, Mike, and myself, that were loosely or less loosely connected with it.
Although everyone helped.
Yeah,
right.
the original team were available and were very generous with their time, and if they had assets, with finding them. But yeah.
But I was wondering, is there anything else that's been changed about the remaster? Like, were any levels or elements revisited? Level design or specific goals? Is all exactly the same?
It is the exact experience. Like,
yeah.
We fixed some bugs, and I think maybe if there was like a seam on a wall or something like that, we'd smooth that out. But for the most part, it is what it was. Upgraded visuals, upgraded controls. The swimming, particularly the controls, needed to be completely redone. The camera, and of course, and adding the Crocopedia.
Right. Is the music the original soundtrack then, or has that been changed at all?
Yeah, the music was amazing, right? And so
It still sounds amazing if it wasn't changed. Yeah.
It's something that the game was known for, was the music. And we had 3 really unique artists come in that did remixes of the music. And I know that one of them is just someone that we've worked with, that we're close with. They're called the Living Tombstone. And so they have a history of doing video game related music. And they did music for a couple of other games. We were kind of having lunch with them, and we said, oh, we're working on this thing called Croc. And one of the 2 guys, it's 2 guys, Sam and Yoav, and Yoav was like, what? Croc? Like, that's my favorite game, right? Like, and he was like, that was one of my first games, and I had, PlayStation, and I played it obsessively, and he was like, how can I get involved? And we said, well, we were like very like sheepish, right? Like, well, would you want to do a remix? We thought, this guy, I mean, he's a professional musician, like, it's like a big ask. And he was like, oh my God, can I? Like, seriously, like, that would be great. So, we dropped that online at the end of October, and they did some really nice animation that goes with it, with Croc kind of running, and it's great. So, and that's on the, it's in the game, and you can like listen to it in game. So,
yeah, it sounds like this game feels like it's a love letter to fans of the series, or fans of the first game as well, of course. And I guess I was wondering what do you think it is about Croc that resonated with so many people? Like, because it's, even in our fan base, like once this was announced, I had a ton of people like talking about that I follow, being like, whoa, I was not expecting a remaster of this game. Awesome! I can't wait to revisit it. I had so many good memories as a kid. So yeah, what is it about Croc, do you think, that really stood the test of time for people?
I think I could probably touch on this. I think the game, just the way it was created, the way it was born with Simon's concepts, and the early development on it. It was, we were quite, for want of a better word, we were quite a quirky group. We'd have a lot of fun, And Simon's very quirky. He has a great sense, great art style that is very like charming and has innocence in it, and really has fun with it. Like, some of the designs that he came up with, some of the stuff that didn't even make it into the game, were just so fun and outlandish. You just couldn't help but smile when you saw them. And I think because this was at a time where games were starting to boom, and as we know it now, games are like hundreds of millions of dollars in some cases, or just very big, and this has become a very big corporate industry in some corners of it. Our game had that very much like indie sort of like charming innocence about it, I think, but still created with a bigger budget than a lot of games probably around that time. And just to sort of retain that style and that sort of like fun element, because we were having fun making it. This is the thing. It wasn't like, go make this game. It's like, all right, we're getting paid to do this. Let's make this game. It was like, yeah, let's make this game. This is fun. Let's make a really great, colorful, vibrant, interesting, super fun game. And I just think when you have that attitude developing or creating anything, it sort of seeps into the product, and then I think other people then enjoy it, and that's what creates a success, I think.
One of the things I noticed about Croc was how universal the appeal was, how it was boys and girls, and it was just across the board. Everyone loved it, and there weren't that many games that had universal appeal, especially back then.
Yeah. And it's in girls particularly, right? We kept hearing that Croc had a huge female kind of fan base, and I think that's a little bit exciting, just because we want everybody to enjoy the game. And we had one person who was at Argonaut, but maybe I think was not on the Croc 1 team, was on the Croc 2 team, and she said, oh, she just loved that his butt wiggled when he walked. And like that's I think testament to the original team, right? And whoever did that animation, I'm sure that was not in the spec, right? That please make butt wiggle, but I'm sure late at night he was like animating and just kind of played with it and said, oh, this looks cute, and it's very subtle, but it gives him a little bit more charm.
There's also been a lot of compliments about the audio over the years. You know, we mentioned the music. I've probably at least 1 in 2 or 3 people that talk to me about it say, you know, the music was so catchy, it was so charming, and I still listen to that music sometimes because obviously people post videos and stuff. And the other side of it too, I think, was all the little catchphrases of Croc. You know, Yazoo, Kasplat, Kapow. You know, it was just fun. And I think that really helped, you know, bring it to life. It was a classic example of you can create an amazing looking thing, but without the sound and the audio to accompany it and the music, you know, it's only half of what it could be, right? So I think that really brought it to life.
And Scott, the voice of Croc was actually a famous actor, right?
Jonathan
Harris.
Yes. Yeah, you got it. Yes.
Nice. So what that means is we actually had 2 famous actors that worked on the original Croc, along with Scott here.
I don't know about famous, but yeah, infamous maybe.
Scott, you're on a TV show. You're famous.
Yeah, I'd definitely say so.
Yeah.
The testament of Croc's reach and appeal. I was playing Astro Bot recently, and I came across a little cameo in the game, being a Croc robot. I'm like, oh my god! First off, how cool is that? Seeing
that was so cool. We were honored that the team of Astro Bot really loved Croc, and were very keen to get it in there, and worked quite closely with us to like get the character on style and so on. So no, it was wonderful to be one of the guests in Astro Bot, and my kids love Astro Bot.
Yeah, it was a real surprise, and they didn't know about the remaster. Like they called us before we announced the remaster, and so we were like, "Oh, is this because of the remaster?" Like, no, what remaster? You know, so that's how great, you know, people remembered Croc, and it turned out that the creative director on Astro Bot was a huge Croc fan. So we started talking, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I love Croc." Like, and they put us in the first DLC, and they gave Croc his own little place and everything, and yeah, we were super excited about that, and they put in the work to make it authentic to Croc. So, you know, we gave them a little feedback in terms of the movement and things like that, and they took it, you know, seriously, and they reacted to our feedback, you know, 100%. So we could not have been happier to see, you know, Astro Bot in the Croc suit.
What a fun surprise for you know, fans of Croc and platformers in general, because Astro Bot is such a great celebration of platforming games, and seeing Croc, one of the originals, there is such a fantastic addition. So I'm curious on, you know, on the timeline for everything. You know, like how long does it? I think was Croc added in the Christmas level? Is that right? If I remember.
Yeah, it was the Christmas DLC, and actually the funny thing is they didn't tell us. And it came out, and then we read it online, and we're like, oh, I guess it's out. And my daughter, who's 16, she saw me playing the first game, and she was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And then this was, you know, like, I don't know, like September or something. So she got a platinum trophy on the first, you know, Astro's Playroom, and she was really into it. And I said, okay, yeah. And I took a picture of her with the platinum trophy behind her, and I sent that to the team at Team Soapy. Awesome. And I said, yeah, we're really into this, right? And then when that dropped, you know, I sat there and I was like, please find this for me, you know. So I just sat and watched her play until she found it, and you know, it was very exciting. We took some screenshots and posted them online. But I mean, the worst part of it was that it was very NDA'd,
right? And
we couldn't say anything, and I really wanted to say something. And the funny thing is, I don't know if you saw this, you know, when you were looking, but when they released Astro Bot, Croc was in the legal line, was in the credits.
Yeah. Oh. The copyrights were in the, so it was kind of
spoiled it.
Like, yeah, it was like if anyone actually reads the credits and the legals, then you would have seen that it did say Croc, copyright Argonaut, and so on. And then I did see people tweeting at the time, well, it says copyright Argonaut, Croc, and all that, but where is Croc? And we couldn't say.
Yeah, we couldn't say.
He's coming.
I kind of got a little bit in trouble. In one interview, they asked me about it, and I said, Google. Like, I can't say anything, but if you Google you'll see something, you know. Because, like, yeah, again, if you Googled it, you'd see that it was clearly coming at some point. But yeah, I mean, that was probably one of the most, thrilling. I mean, I worked on 20 PlayStation 1 games, and Croc was the only one that made it into Astro Bot. So
how long was that entire process from like, the first call, like, hey, we want to put Croc in the game, to when it actually came out?
I think, Jez, I mean, you got that first email. I think it was like 8 months.
Yeah, it was probably more than 6 months. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they emailed us, and then nothing happened for a couple of months, and then, paperwork showed up, and then, it was like 4 months before we got the concept art, and we thought we were going to be in the first launch, and then they said, well, we're gonna put you in this first DLC, and then then Christmas came. So yeah, it might have been more than 8 months.
Wow.
Mostly just waiting. When I say waiting, I mean waiting, like excited, waiting, like when are we gonna see it? Yeah, it was cool.
And that's it for part 1, so thanks for watching, but make sure to stay tuned for part 2 coming soon, in which they answer a ton of questions from all of you, including that mysterious Yoshi racing game. With that out of the way, thanks for watching, click subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll catch you later. Bye everyone!